none of us knew any of the lore around Atakhan, even though it's like cool. But what does get through to us are the videos.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm like, oh, that was super sick. Like, so I know everything there. So like the lore, I know they put a lot of work into it, and there's the game, and there was like.
Have you considered doing picture books instead of patch?
Exactly.
For the sophisticated.
What about the motion
exactly. Well, I'm just saying, there's a lot of TikTok brain people out there. So like a little short form video, slap that right in the center of the. Hello and welcome back to The Dive, driven by Kia Season 9, episode number 12. We are going to have a special guest later in the episode. We won't spoil it now, even though the title probably already spoiled it and the thumbnail probably already spoiled it. He said, but Matt, he didn't do it. He was
Matt, lead designer on League of Legends.
No, they're so spoiled now.
League balance designer, lead designer. One of those.
Gameplay
designer.
systems.
Not the best spoiler.
I don't think he's balanced. I think he's like he's higher up. He's like the man behind the man or something. He oversees everything.
He's the guy in the chair who's just with his evil cat that he's petting and stuff.
And this is why we don't spoil things in preview, because
spoiled. They know what I'm talking about. It's Phroxzon.
Boy. It's actually I'm definitely excited to have him coming on, because there are some big changes coming in this patch that is actually already out while we are talking.
We could be at home playing League of Legends.
You could do it right now on that laptop. Actually,
with the touchpad, should we just queue up?
I wouldn't snitch on you.
Yeah, Meteos like, I'm already playing.
But some more interesting news, maybe more applicable to the LTA and our competitive league, is that Team Liquid actually made the jump. So we've been following this and talking about this week after week. The TL and the FlyQuest to some degree, talking about 6-person roster, and TL were just scrimming with other positions. They were scrimming with mid laners, they were scrimming with junglers. They have actually made the jump to fully bump up Yuuji to the 6-person roster. So it is official. And Yuuji was doing exceptionally well in Tier 2 on the Dragonsteel team. Very impressive jungler. So this, I think a lot of people, because there has been so much conversation around UmTi, and even though he's been doing better lately, I think a lot of people are going to be excited about this and it being kind of an official thing, not just behind closed doors in scrims. They were already splitting time, which we talked about at length in the last couple of episodes. But I think it is actually exciting, because when I first heard about the splitting scrims and stuff, I was wondering and asking Spawn, are the Tier 2 players actually getting a real shot? Is there a real path to the tier 1 team? And he was like, yeah, it's individual, it's player to player. So it sounds like for Yuuji, the path is there. And, it's going to be one of those dreaded splitting times, though. Meteos, are you worried for the outcome here?
I'm never a fan of it. I will say that I think if you're splitting time in a way where both players are, only focused on that one team, because I think the worst way to split time is if you have like academy team and main team where you're just switching places, because then it's not only you have two different players learning different things to the team, but it's like you're learning how to play with two different teams, which is wildly different. So I'm never going to be a fan of it, but I think that if both the players switching out are still just watching and involved with everything going on, it could potentially be better. But I think it's always going to be better if you just have one guy you're playing with.
Yeah. Yuuji, though, I think is really, really hype. He is back-to-back NACL MVP. He's reigning NACL champion. I think he's the only person to ever win back-to-back MVPs.
That's what Arsh said. Yeah.
So I think that's really cool as well. And this was just a little tidbit I read from the Sheep Esports article, which I thought was cool, was the last 3 NACL MVPs to get in to LTA, LCS, all reached top 8 at Worlds. Dokla, Busio, and Masu. So that's kind of cool,
Yeah,
right?
that's
So it's like definitely the expectations are kind of high, and there was already a lot of talk, going into this year. People thought he was going to actually be able to get on a team in LTA or even in LEC and stuff. But then there was some problems with residency because people thought he was going to be able to count as a resident, but then he didn't actually get resident status. So he didn't count as a resident. So then some teams, I think, that were interested in actually picking him up weren't able to get him. So now he has an opportunity here because he isn't a resident, but neither is UmTi. So he'd be coming in an import slot.
Wait, where is he from?
Mongolia, I believe. I think it was.
Okay.
I'd have to double check on that, but I think it is
Yeah.
Mongolia.
And then for some reason, I think he got ruled under
Mongolia.
the competitive rules. For some reason, he's a resident for EMEA, though.
Yeah, I think he was. So
weird.
I don't know when and where he when he moved to the States because he played in collegiate esports here as well.
I mean, he's played his whole career in NA.
Yeah, so I just wasn't sure because sometimes someone's born in Mongolia but then they move here when they're like 3 or they move here that's pretty different than if you move here when you're 20. I just don't know his exact story. I'm not familiar enough with it, but yeah, he was born in Mongolia. He played he's played his whole time in North America, so the expectation was that he would have residency.
His League of Legends life has been all NA.
Yes, exactly. But I think it's a really exciting pickup. I will say, I'm hyped to see how he does for TL, and I always think it's cool when it's like we've won back-to-back MVPs in NACL. What else are you supposed to do to get a chance at tier 1?
That's a good point.
There's literally nothing else you could do, right? He's the only person to ever do that. So that is really, really exciting. The other side of it is I read a really sad interview with UmTi. Shout out to NA-Men or NA-Men, whatever you want to call it. NA-Men Central they've been doing some really good interviews. I'm not actually sure who did the interview, but they have it on their Twitter, and it got some attention because UmTi was clearly very sad when he was actually doing it. And, it was clear that he knew about these changes coming, but couldn't say it. And he's saying I can't say the reason I'm feeling sad right now. Vibes are not good. I was having a hard time with that for sure. I can't tell you about it, basically. And, and just the tone, even though it is written, the tone is kind of displayed pretty well throughout the interview. And it just made me feel sad, right? Because UmTi is a really nice guy, and it's clear that he does get a lot of hate. And I think he has had some really bad moments and stuff, but he's also, it almost feels like he's beaten down to the point where even when he plays really well, he's like, oh yeah, I'm sure they probably thought I was bad again. And it was I think this was after one of his series where he won a player of the series, I think it was even, or player of the game or whatever. And and he was saying something to the effect of, oh, yeah, they probably thought they were probably blaming me for this game, or probably thought I was really bad this game, talking about the community. He says, I think a lot of the time someone was blaming me, everyone online was blaming me a lot. I don't know if today was like that because I don't see that kind of thing, but I don't really mind. And then the editors know he got player of the series for this win. And so it's just sad that he's feeling kind of that beaten down about it, and clearly, because he's such a happy, nice guy when you run into him, and it's just sad.
Yeah, that was their series versus Lyon, because I remember I was like, oh man, his Skarner game at first was really good. He was the one punishing a lot of Lyon's overstay, where Lyon kept on doing an extra play on a tower dive or something like that each time. And then he also had a very good Pantheon game. Then he died a couple times, afterwards. But I still think overall it was quite good. And I was like, yeah, when someone is getting flamed a lot for the bad plays, he deserves credit for when he's having good games and good plays and stuff. So but I definitely see the reasoning for TL behind the decision.
It totally makes sense.
And I think it is.
Yeah,
I think it is.
Because if you look at Yuuji's stats, it's hard to find someone with better stats. So you mentioned, he got back-to-back MVP in NACL this season. He's 10-0, averaging less than 1 death per game. Yeah, I don't know. Like you said, there's not much more you can do. It was kind of the same thing with Surdy getting into the league. It was got rank 1 in solo queue, crazy win rate.
1 collegiate, 1 NACL.
Yeah, exactly. It's I think there always is going to be a pretty big jump. I wouldn't expect UG to come in here and just sweep the league or anything like that, especially with, how TL looks as a team. But, it's possible. He's very good, but it just depends. I always like the, fish in a pond analogy, right? It's you're a big fish in a small pond, but it's like when you go from NACL to LCS, it's like you're in a much bigger pond, but like you could have been a really, really big fish. So like you're still gonna be a big fish, or you're not gonna be a big. I don't know. Like it's just one of those things.
The competition is just way higher.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
And so it's. I talked to a few different people who actually scrim against TL when they were doing tryouts, because they tried out Yuuji as well as Kizno for jungle, and then they tried out Toasty for mid lane. And from this is just like two different pros I talked to. Both told me they thought TL was worse with all of the different subs, at least in the scrims. That was their read. But to your point, it's like, you can't judge Yuuji like to the same level as you're judging UmTi, who has been playing together with his team for a year and a half now, or whatever it is. Obviously it's going to take a little bit of time for people to adjust, and I think the expectation isn't necessarily from TL that it's like instantaneous, greatest jungler in the world. But I do think it's exciting, and TL clearly. They're just not what they were last year, right? And it's clear that that's not just going to magically change. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more changes coming as well.
I was gonna say it's not all on UmTi. It is a lot.
Definitely
with,
not.
some solo lanes. So
This year, I mean, for most of this year, APA has not been as good, and now Impact's not looking that good anymore either. So I do think there's definitely. No one is safe necessarily, I think, on TL right now. So
which is not a great feeling.
No.
Yeah. So.
But hopefully they can. And the other thing, to be fair, sometimes one change can kind of like spark a bigger change within things, and players' performances can change. Maybe it's like you get that kind of like honeymoon phase where people are feeling good, and maybe it is things that we're not seeing, behind the scene that can be adjusted or changed, with someone else coming in that could improve things for other players too. So we'll see. I'm hopeful that TL can get really good into form. I mean, not that they're doing like horrible or anything, but it's like for how good they were last year, the expectations are obviously really high, and thinking of them as like a championship caliber team. Yeah. And we want to see them get back to that.
Yeah. We also had some very sad news for some League of Legends history overall. Shushe, who was the Season 1 champion, Gragas player. I remember him very clearly. He's such a nice guy. He was one of our big, like, on-stage performers. Went up and did the Gragas belly bump. There was a lot of celebration. He has passed away from cancer. And it is
only 36 as well.
It is
super
really sad, yeah. And because it makes like especially me, who I was like there. It's just, I don't know. It's very sad, and it feels, unfair.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is, right? It's obviously horrible for him and his friends, his family. So definitely our thoughts go out to them. He's the guy who like my earliest like forever memory is associated with from League, because I mean I played League a tiny bit in beta, but I wasn't even like level 30 or anything. I was still doing pro gaming and other things. But I remember when the first World Championship happened, all these people were talking about it, and so I tuned in and I watched towards the end of it, and I remember watching the finals. So I watched the finals and they won, and then Shushe was their mid laner and he was playing Gragas at the time, which was a really strong mid laner. And like he's doing this interview and he comes out and he has like his barrel and he's doing his like Gragas cosplay for the interview after winning, and I just thought that was so fun. So definitely one of the kind of like lasting memories I have associated. Really, my like first big memory associated with all esports is associated with him. So definitely really sad to see him go, but also very cool that he's gonna have his Gragas skin in the game forever, right? They have the Fnatic Gragas skin in the game, so definitely respect to him, and hopefully. Hopefully his family is doing as okay as they can be.
All right, into the LTA games then, because we have completed our first weekend of the best of Fearless, the best of threes. We got a nice little taste. Coming up first this weekend is going to be FlyQuest versus Shopify. FlyQuest look like the giant in this group. Like Cloud9 and FlyQuest both look like they're like, these are our groups. Everyone knows who's on top in each one, who's calling the shots. So FlyQuest versus Shopify, after Shopify had this heartbreaking, I would definitely say, for them, loss to Dig. it just feels like an uphill battle already as far as mentalities for the two teams.
I was hate watching
going into
Shopify.
it.
I'm not gonna lie. After
Their first game was so good, though. The first game was
it was strictly because of Fudge misclicking his Seekers and then Zhonya's twice in a row within like 5 minutes. After that, like, one time, whatever, it's fine. Tournament realm, your settings are different. You messed up. He didn't have any other active. I'm not sure what he was trying to do. It happens, so you can give him a pass one time. It's still bad. Then he did it again right away afterwards with his Zhonya, and that was right before they lost the fight. And, maybe they would have won the fight if he could have frontlined a little better with his Zhonyas. And so after that, I was full-on hate watching. That actually tilted me hard when I was sitting there watching. So I'm not going to, I don't want to say deserved loss for them in the series, but kind of was.
Let's not pretend though that was the only reason they lost.
It tilted his whole team and all the viewers.
Pardon?
It tilted his whole team and all the viewers.
Fair, but that second game was crazy to watch. I just felt like they literally did nothing. Like they just weren't even trying to do stuff. Like they were at what point? I want to say it was an 8,000 gold lead.
It's close.
Or right about.
It was 7,898. So
very close.
I'm a bit of a stickler as far as the judge goes.
7,898 gold lead was what they were at. And I remember at that point, they had 5 members all around Baron. And Surdy is split pushing bot. And they basically are too scared to start Baron, but also too scared to engage. No one bases to match Surdy inside. Surdy just gets to push this whole wave from down 8k, take the tier 2 completely uncontested, crash the wave on the inhibitor tower. Still, they haven't started Baron or gone to answer. And it was I don't even know how long. It felt like an eternity. So I'm not sure how long they were actually fiddling around with the Baron. I want to say it was at least a couple minutes straight though, without doing anything, without answering the side waves, without finding an engage. They kind of haphazardly walked forward a little bit, but no one was starting the Baron and no one's answering Surdy. So the rest of Dignitas doesn't need to actually get in engage range or feel any pressure. I just thought it was absolutely insane that a professional level team did not start the Baron to at least force the TP of the Renekton, and then either you look for a turn or you just back off and you've got his TP. At least do something. And I just thought that was by far the worst part of the game. And Fudge obviously looks really stupid pressing his Zhonyas and stuff. That's that play that you can kind of look towards. It's like someone flashing in the wall or whatever. It's the obvious thing. But I just thought their shot calling and their macro in that moment where you have multiple forms of engage, you're up 8,000 gold, you're sitting by the Baron for multiple minutes without starting it, without answering sides, that to me was criminal. It was crazy.
Yeah. It definitely, that wasn't the only thing that went wrong. I also think I didn't like Palafox's build this game when I was watching. He was playing the tank Ahri, but he just never got a Void Staff. And the other team was, when I saw Dig's draft, in my mind, I was saying, okay, they've got Renekton, Sedge, Sylas, Kalista. This is the most early game comp you've ever seen. They have to get a super early soul if they want to win this game, or they just can't win at all. And they were winning early, but then they started throwing fights. And so I was saying, all right, they lose. They can't win from this point. But somehow Shopify managed to throw it back, which I don't know. It didn't seem like you could lose from this point in the game. You just have Ezreal can just walk up, start queuing people. You counter engage when they try to go in. Kallista's going to get outranged, but I don't know. I think no Void on Ahri, like you were saying, just questionable macro. It was. Yeah,
I mean they had.
It was a pretty rough game.
Leona, Gragas, and you're up almost 8,000 gold, and you're and Ahri, and you're not confident to start the Baron and then turn. You have 50 forms of engage.
Yeah.
I've got some data for you, some more data, Azael.
Okay.
It was 5 minutes where they had over a 7,000 gold lead, and it didn't budge. And the only reason that changed and the 5 minutes ended is because then Dig started making
they took
gains.
Tier 2 bot.
It started going up. So, that's why I'm saying the mentality is coming into this matchup that we're looking at with FlyQuest. I feel like Shopify DeMonte's got to do a lot of work, a lot of mental,
ice plunges,
refocus. Yeah, exactly.
Of all the oranges,
they're gonna have to do some cold plunges. What's the meme? The Saratoga water. They're gonna have everybody's waking
rub
up.
some banana peels on your face.
Everybody's waking up at 5 a.m. Cold plunge, banana peels,
jumping in the pool,
get the right water, and just focus up. As far as like figuring out who is going to be their in-game shot caller in critical situations like this is really going to be important as well, because versus FlyQuest, you don't get a lot of opportunities like this. FlyQuest make their choices for lane assignments, their choices where they're going. Is like Inspired is the general, and all the troops are marching to his beat, so they don't do a lot of hesitating as far as the mid and late game choices that they make. So if Shopify want to have a chance even in this game, it has got to be no hesitation. It's got to be like full sending, go in with the game plan, execute on the game plan. And I think a lot of work needs to be done outside of the game before they even get on stage.
Yeah, I mean, the tough thing for me is that Shopify, I had a lot of hope through the first couple of weeks because they actually had a really close game. At 30 minutes, they were up 300 gold against FlyQuest, right? They had been down a bit of gold, but they came back. It's like, chance to win that game. And that was true against most of the top teams. I think 3 of the 4 top teams, they were actually, at 27 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever, they were in with a chance. Like they had, the gold about at parity or a slight lead for themselves. And I saw those games and I was like, okay, like they're almost there. But then it just keeps happening and keeps happening and keeps happening. And you start to think like, okay, well, maybe these, it's not so easy to solve, right? Because then it is clearly some sort of late game issue, whether it's their shot calling or their macro or they're not on the same page. Like those are complex issues to solve on a team. But because it keeps happening, I'm getting less and less confident that they can solve it as far as how they're going to play out the late games. But yeah, their last game against FlyQuest, they did have a 300 very slight gold lead at 30 minutes. They had been down, about 2K or something earlier, but they, got some picks. They made some plays. I think they won a team fight around Dragon, I think it was, and then were able to get to a position where okay, they're in a decent spot. They then were still they gave up soul and whatever, and then they lost. But I don't know. I mean, FlyQuest are obviously heavy favorites, but I just want Shopify to get it together a little bit because clearly they have the talent to get into these good positions, but it's just sad to see them constantly not be able to close it.
I think a lot of it is shot calling. On the positive note, though, I do want to remind people, even though everyone's going to remember the last 2 games of the Shopify vs. Dig series, also because they set records as longest games in the LTA, which these 2 teams have all of the top 3,
They have all of the top
which
3,
is pretty funny.
crazy.
The first game in that series was completely dominant from Shopify, extremely clean. The only person to even die on their team was the Nautilus, Seos, who was starting out all these fights. And so they actually did a good job in the first game of Contracts getting really far ahead on the Nefiri, snowballing. They even played side lanes to be able to end out the game. So there is, I believe, some shining light of hope and
I think Contracts has been their star.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would agree, for sure.
Would you be one of those people?
Could be one in the horde, one of the many.
I did also like the Rise Top. I actually felt like Rise Top into Rumble looked pretty nice from Fudge. And I feel like one of the issues that people have had when they're playing Rise mid is I think they struggle to know how to play out the rest of the game. For example, it's when we've seen Rise mid, and I feel like they're kind of just slotting it in as though it's an Azir or an Ahri, or it's easier to just play that normal standard team fight. And they aren't out in side lanes, where top laners more play out the game, I think, more heavily through side lanes. It just felt like it was easier for them to play out the game to the way that a Rise would want to do it. And they actually used realm warps really, really well. I felt like that game. They moved them around the map really well. I thought Fudge played a really strong game. And they even had, I think, Talia in that one. It was the Talia, Nefiri, Rise. I felt like their map movement was really, really good in that. And it does feel like when they're confident, they're looking good. But as soon as it becomes unclear how to advance the game, then they really stall out.
Yeah, they've definitely shown some signs of improvement. But I don't know. Against FlyQuest, I would not give them much of a chance personally. I think I don't know. They don't look like a top 4 team. I think too many random mistakes. Even their laning doesn't look particularly impressive. So I would expect a 2-0.
So FlyQuest, I think we should examine a little bit. They're not like immune to criticism for the FlyQuest side. Of course, I think they're strongest team in the group, and they're certainly favored here. Are you guys concerned at all about the 100 Thieves game where they did get behind early again? I know it's like, oh, this again. 100 Thieves got ahead early and then, lost the game, and and FlyQuest came back in a very impressive manner. But when we examine our top teams, do we want to is there still something there as far as a little bit to worry about?
I mean, I think that it's always something that you have to look at, right? You can't just completely wipe it away, because it's just as much as if you use 100 Thieves as an example, 100 Thieves versus Liquid in the finals or whatever, it's Liquid won all the games, but 100 Thieves also created really big leads early. So it's so a better team who is more stable in late game, if they get if they're able to create those advantages, could beat you, right? So I do think it's something to look at. The first game, I'm assuming, is the one you were talking about. Yeah, because 100 Thieves got about 1,700 ahead at the highest point. Mm-hmm. So they were able to open up a pretty decent advantage, but not crazy. And honestly, even in that game, I remember watching that game and never really thinking that 100 Thieves could win, even though they had the gold lead. Because even though they opened up this slight gold lead, it's with Jace, Pantheon, Kalista. And to me, that was very early game focused. And when I look over at the other side, I see Gragas and Zinzao and Azir and Corki, and I felt like they scaled better in 5 out of 5 roles probably. So to me, at least for that one in particular, I wasn't really that concerned.
Really, even leading up, because leading up to the dragon fight, the one where Quad makes this big Azir sweep. They had gotten all the objectives in addition to the gold lead. All Void Grubs and the previous dragon. Mm-hmm. And so at that point, it felt kind of like a breaking point. I guess if they had won that fight, I felt like the snowball, they could have continued the snowball probably. Yeah. But then
I would have started getting nervous if they got the third dragon for sure.
Yeah. Of course, then Quad had a huge Azir.
Yeah, I don't know. Kalista just looks so fake to me, and
I think
in all these LTA games, I think she is way more of a situational pick than she's being played as right now. I think her presence is so high, kind of permabanned, or I think teams might feel inclined to pick her if she's up. But I don't know, especially games into Azir specifically, it looks so unplayable because she's very short range, kind of has to snowball the game, and then late game is kind of a whatever champion, right? It's she doesn't hit that hard. She's not particularly tanky. Her and also, you need to be very proficient at her to even do the basics. So I'm not a huge fan of Kalista. And I just got to say, Azir looks so insane right now. This is he's a pro play staple champion. He shows up periodically. But this version of him, where you don't need to buy a lost chapter item, they're not even buying Nashers anymore. They're just going almost like a bruiser tank build. It's rushing Leandries into Riftmaker or Zonias, and then still doing crazy damage. I'm just damn, he's got it all. He's a mobile, tanky, assassin, playmaker, hyper carry. It's just geez, this champ is not balanced.
Yeah. At the highest skill levels, it is just insanely broken, right? Because you say, it literally does everything. And to the Kalista point, I think Kalista is really strong in isolation when you're looking at what the champion can do, on average in most matchups, because it can be a really huge lane bully, and some of these pairings are really hard to lane against. But the problem is, it's only let through when the other team has a specific plan to deal with it, right? And it's usually, like you say, things like Azir and just in general range. Often when it's getting through, you're being played into, Varus and Karma, or Ashe or whatever, or Corki and Azir, and champions that you struggle to interact with a lot. And so I think that to me is the biggest problem, is that it's just when it gets let through, it's the other team is intentionally letting it through, as a trap, basically. And even everyone talks about, even the bot laners who think that Masu and Busio are a better bot lane, or Sven and Vulcan are better bot lane now, people still talk about Yon and Core JJ as the best bot lane by far for the aggressive picks, right? And so you would think that Kalista would be that would be their thing. Even with them, they've not really look that dominant on it. They're 1-2 on the pick. They did get one win this weekend, but in general, it just hasn't looked very effective in LTA.
Yeah.
What's really, really funny and why I started smiling when this whole conversation of Callista in early game came up, Tomo won the second longest LTA game in history on Callista because it was that Dignitas game where they were like the shortest range comp of all time with all the...
I don't think that comp is supposed to win late game. I think something went horribly wrong.
I was like, oh my goodness. Anyways, the powerhouse late game carry Callista, was able to take that game. But I definitely feel like FlyQuest looks so good heading into this, and not too worried about it.
So how do you guys feel about quad right now? Because it's interesting. A few people I was talking to, and I can't remember how much of this was said on like in interviews and whatever, and how much was just said to me. So I don't want to say who said it, but like a few people were telling me basically that they felt like quad is actually not that good anymore. He's just kind of getting like credit for how good he was before. And that people thought he was going to, like some pros were telling me, they're like, he's a fraud now. He's going to be exposed once we get to best of 5. And he once he's off of basically like the Azir and like a couple range champions, Azir Talia and stuff, so like he's a fraud. Like you're going to see he's not good anymore. And I thought that was really interesting because largely the perception is like super, super positive for him. But people are telling me he can't play Melee champions. It's going to be exposed.
I was feeling very underwhelmed by him this split, and that's what I was talking about on the waiting room in the morning. But then this series was really good from him this last weekend. So
he was smurfing.
But I was already feeling like him as well as a little bit Masu, because I expect a lot from them. So far this split hadn't been like quite as extremely impressive. And to me, FlyQuest had been mostly about Inspired and Bwipo this split. And which to me, I was like feeling like, that's why I was like, a little bit kind of sad about it, because I wanted a positive story about those two carries. And then this past weekend, both of them very impressive and kind of fighting, I guess, back into the split. So I was gonna be right there on that, on that storyline of maybe overrated now, maybe blah blah blah. But I think a little bit of my faith was definitely renewed.
Yeah, I think he looks fine to me. I don't have any issue with how Quad's been playing. I know that before, when he had a lot of success, he was playing almost exclusively 80 carries, and I could totally see a champion pool issue arising, since I think we've seen him play like one Silas, one Yone game, and he didn't look that comfortable on them. He didn't like hard feed, but it was kind of like he was a passenger in the game. He didn't need to carry or pop off or make any plays. He's just kind of there. He had the Lucian game against Cloud9, where even though he did well in lane, he was, not really able to do anything in fights. And I don't think Lucian's a particularly good champion right now, but it seemed like he wasn't the most comfortable on it. I think he does really well on like his carries. Like, I think if there are 80 carries mid, or his Cassio is obviously really good. That was his main for a long time. I think his Azir looks good. So I think he's probably got enough, especially BO3 Fearless. I wouldn't be too worried. Maybe BO5. If people like get a really solid lockdown on his pool, that could be a problem for him. But I would say so far it's fine. I wouldn't be too worried about his FlyQuest. But maybe in the future.
I feel like he's been playing pretty well. It's just interesting to hear people's opinions, because I feel like mid lane is like less clear now than it has been for a while, because there's a lot of good mid laners in the league now. Yeah. Should we talk about the next matchup?
Yes.
We got TL versus DSG, the rematch, the grudge match. TL lost to DSG last time they did meet up. And it was pretty surprising, because that was DSG came off of getting absolutely blasted by Dignitas the day before, and it's like, okay, is this team even going to win a game? And then they beat TL, and that was to end the first stage, the first positioning phase. And so now we are obviously going to have the BO3 between these teams. And DSG, I think they definitely showed some hope against C9. I think it was the second game especially. They actually looked quite competitive, if I have that right in my head. So I feel like DSG at least is like showing us something. And Scary Jerry was on pros, and he was still kind of talking. He still feels pretty confident. Has mentioned multiple times that they're like usually beating TL a lot in scrims and everything. So even though on paper I think everyone's going to be expecting TL, I do wonder if there's going to be a little bit more to it than that.
Yeah, I think DSG, like you said, it was game 2 where they actually looked like not the last place team for sure. I mean, honestly, they've had a lot
really good. So to be
they've had a lot of really rough games, and they were actually making C9 sweat, right? Like they were picking on Loki a lot. They were getting a lot of kills. I think their early game was very good. Huhi and XU were very active. They were like making a ton of plays on C9, which even though I think C9 was doing a pretty good job playing defensively, like they were getting out of a lot of the ganks with Braum, like at low HP. DSG was still, finding openings. I think that they had that really good dragon fight where they killed Loki and Sven right away, and then they ended up throwing it Baron afterwards. But I think Abadage had a pretty impressive game on Rise. He had a lot of really good ults, whether it was to catch people, to get out, whatnot. I think it was one of the better Rise games we've seen as far as utilizing that ultimate.
Honestly felt like Castle has generally been really solid in lane for them. He got absolutely destroyed by Thanatos in game 2. Like, not even a little close. Like, he got slammed by Thanatos. In game 1, he actually solo killed him 1v1 with the Vladimir counterpick, and I thought he was playing pretty well. So this isn't just like, let's dunk on Castle. It was more like, I was surprised how badly he did into Thanatos in that game. And the rest of the team was actually doing really well. If Castle was evenish, they had a real chance to win that game. But he got absolutely blasted. He had counterpick into the Renekton, went with the Grasp Aatrox, and then just got completely destroyed. Like, he was down 30, 40 CS very early in the game and was such a non-factor the entire game. And the game kind of became this duel between Abadaga and Thanatos. And it was kind of like they were the super fed members on either side. And it was kind of like who was going to be able to do more. And there was that one fight where, oh God, was it by Atakhan or was it by Baron? I can't remember, but like they basically like realm warped over to try to like pick someone off, and I think they committed like everything to trying to kill Loki, I want to say it was, and then Thanatos was TPing in, and Abadaga and like everyone ran over to try to kill Loki, but they couldn't actually 100 to 0 him. He got all his spells off, and then because Abadaga was trying to run in and kill Loki, he was like standing on the ward that Thanatos was TPing on, and then Thanatos arrives and he's like literally melee range on the Rise, who has just spent all his spells on the Victor, and he kills him. They wipe them out, and like that was kind of the game. But prior to that, it was like actually like a really close back and forth game. Minus, I felt like the top lane where Castle just got slammed 1v1 really early. But that isn't like normal for him. I feel like he's over the last couple weeks often been the like bright point of like he had that Yorick game where he was the only one kind of doing anything. The game before on the Vladimir, he was really the only one doing anything. But this time Thanatos was just, and I know people talk about his Renekton, but yeah, he blasted Castle.
He is built diff for sure, because I think a lot of top laners, when you play Renekton, it's like the champion you pick to, he's kind of like the Ezreal of top lane, right? It's like you pick him to like not lose, but you're kind of going to be invisible and useless later on. But Thanatos is like hard winning every matchup with this champion, and then he also goes Eclipse, which if you're not super ahead on Renekton and you go Eclipse, you're going to be so squishy, but he pulls it off almost every time he picks a champ. So yeah, I don't know. He's just for sure my MVP so far. He's just looked so good in every game. To me, he just seems like the biggest gap between him and then the next guy for any role right now.
Yeah. I wanted to give a lot of credit in the dragon fight you were talking about also to Loki, because yeah, Thanatos definitely deserves it, and he ruled that game and he smashed. But the Loki play you're talking about, watching it as it was happening, I was getting so worried because he was going into the dragon pit as the Victor.
I think it was a different one then, because I was thinking of one top lane.
Oh, okay. Well, the one where it really broke open, where Thanatos like chases them all down and like wipe them at dragon, where he's like in the pit, like 1v3ing and then chases them out over the top of the pit too. It starts because Loki on the Rise, or on the Victor, walks into the dragon pit, and he's able to get off the gravity field laser combo and then pops his ult and immediately Zhonya's. And so they all go to him, and then he flashes out and he's still able to live and dealt, like 40% of all these people's lives, and then Thanatos arrives and like it kills everyone. I was like, oh my goodness, like you also deserve a lot of credit for the people who kind of like set things up and escape. So yeah, I mean Cloud9 overall was looking quite good in that one, but
oh yeah, it was this exact play. It was by Atakhan. It was at like 21 minutes. They had just started Atakhan, and then Loki walks in and DSG goes up to attack Loki, but they already see the TP from Thanatos, and then like while they're hitting Loki, Thanatos just arrives and then just kind of kills them all.
Yeah, I feel like Loki did such a good job in multiple situations. Having a big presence while like utilizing, even though he's on a fairly frail champion, getting a lot of damage out. Anyway,
that was a
back to
tank.
Early injuries.
That was a tank.
No one's frail in mid lane anymore,
yeah,
buddy.
and you always have to keep track of those Zhonya's timings. Those things. Well, I guess not if you're gonna play against Fudge. Oh, one last burn. Well, he makes it
Catching strays.
That's not a stray.
I almost didn't say it because I was like, oh man, I feel bad. But Meteos said it's funny, if it. Anyways, back.
It's Meteos' fault I made fun of Fudge.
I like Fudge, but that was just such a heinous act.
He has to pay for his crimes.
Yeah, I mean,
we got him back on track though, because this was the disguised matchup versus TL. We started talking about disguised and some of the positive things that we have seen from them. I actually went and played beach volleyball with Scary Jerry and Abadaga yesterday.
How would you rate their beach volley performances out of 10?
Scary Jerry was a smurf from beginning to end.
10 out of 10? 10 out of 10 volleyball?
Abadaga, Felix took a while to warm up. He was learning. At the beginning, he was trying to hit it like a hammer like this. He was just every play. But he calibrated.
Not a lot of beaches where he's from, maybe?
He got in there. Jerry coached him a little bit, and then he starts smurfing too.
Synergy. There you go.
Yeah, synergy. But they, talking about like mentality and stuff, because, in talking about this guy's team, in the past, it has been like, almost like a hard thing for us to bring up because it is so sad and like, depressing where they had really good attitudes. They were like, and they were even joking about it. They're like, yeah, we beat TL, so they let us out.
All I could think of is like, it's the meme where it's like, you ask someone, oh, how good do you think this guy is? And then they go, well, he's a really nice guy.
Yeah.
That's like what you just hit them with. You're like, it's so hard to talk about. They're so depressing. But then I played beach volleyball with them, and they were really cool. I like them a lot. It's like
it had been before they got their win. That's the point. They got their win. I think actually did a lot, for this team. So honestly, I'm way more excited to watch any of their games than I previously was, and especially a rematch versus TL, because there's going to be a huge grudge here. TL. It honestly was embarrassing to be the only of the top 4 teams to lose that game. And I know that they were certainly not happy about it at all. So now you have this matchup where Disguised are very confident versus this team because of their scrim success and because they did it on stage. And TL have been taking a lot of heat from the community and criticism, and honestly do have a lot of holes in their gameplay. So I don't think this whole weekend is like write it off. It's going to be higher rated team smashes the lower rated team.
You could do it.
I mean, I would still put the chances fairly low, but now I do. Prior to their previous win and with how it had been going, when they got completely smashed by Dig, if you asked me that then,
no shot.
I would actually say no. There is not a shot. Yeah. But now, after playing volleyball with them,
there's a chance.
Yeah, no. Exactly.
One win against TL, little beach volleyball, getting Kobe's good graces.
I'm back on board. You son of a gun! I'm back in.
I don't give him.
Meteos not back in.
He wasn't there for beach volleyball. So.
I didn't see.
He didn't see the
Scary
synergy.
Jerry's serves or anything, but I don't know. I think DSG looks like they've improved. If they're enough to beat TL in a best of 3, I would still say no. Possible. I mean, obviously they beat them already, and they looked okay against C9, but I don't know. Maybe if TL's having a really, really bad day.
So I will say, and if we examine like the small scenario where they would do it, in their game where they won, they beat Impact up hard. Like Impact and honestly, it was when they swapped lanes and Huhi's Nico, like they dove him multiple times. Then Impact was like losing waves out to Castle, so Castle started getting really far ahead, and like TL could not catch up. They kept swapping back and forth, and they were just so far behind. And that was a real one that felt very rough for Impact and for TL. So to kind of the point you guys were making earlier about them like targeting certain players and finding ways to look to get their own advantages. That's what they did versus TL.
And Castle, I've actually really loved watching him just because he's just trying stuff. Like he's trying all kinds of different champions. In 9 games, he's played 8 different champions. And this guy's kind of becoming like Bovo Jr. to me, where it's just like it's just been fun to watch. Like I actually think he generally is really, really solid in how he plays out his lanes. He's played Vladimir, Yorick, Galio, Mbessa, Nard, Jace, Gwen, and then 2 games of Aatrox.
Yeah.
And so I do think when you talk about like potentially targeting Impact, if they were trying to do it how they did it last time, he could go with some kind of wacky counter pick or something a little bit out of left field, and maybe they can create an advantage there. But I definitely expect TL to win. They're
same.
Absolutely favorites. But that being said, like the game from Abadog against C9, that gave me a little bit more hope. I think that was the best game that he played. And so we'll see if they can make it competitive and if they can pull off another upset. I mean, if they beat TL in the best of 1 and then they beat them in the best of 3, then TL is going to be panicking a little bit, but it would be exciting. The next day we have 100 Thieves versus Dig kicking things off. 100 Thieves just coming off of their match against FlyQuest, who is the other obviously top team in the group, and did kind of give them a bit of a butt whooping. But obviously 100 Thieves I think is still pretty favored against all the other teams in the group.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, they are so good at getting these early leads, even in a lot of games that they have lost. And Dignitas, they go hand in hand. Even though they did beat Shopify, you're right there setting the record for all these longest games in LTA history. So I don't think 100 Thieves are going to let them get there. We have seen 100 Thieves be very capable in ending those games. So I think this one, I actually am feeling pretty one-sided about it, especially even like going down some of the matchups too in the individual lanes.
That's funny because I'm sort of the opposite on this one. To me, I feel like
you're a believer now.
Well, I would say that
selling C9 and buying Dignitas.
I would say that Dig has looked better than they have before, but also I think 100 Thieves is kind of in a weird spot right now where they keep talking about losing all their scrims, and even though some teams joke about that, I think that's a pretty bad thing if you're a team that's losing all your scrims. And what I've heard, I asked C9 about it, and basically the way 100 Thieves plays is they just take every single fight no matter what, which is kind of like it's a way to play the game, but I don't think it's a very real way to play the game. Obviously it's good to be aggressive. You should take a lot of fights, but you shouldn't take literally every fight. And that's including 4v5s, fights where you're outnumbered, fights where your conditions bad, item disadvantage, whatever. If you're taking legitimately every fight, you're kind of a troll. And I don't think that's going to be a good long-term strategy. And then also just kind of like listening to their interviews, like Quid specifically feels like his confidence in both himself and his team is kind of at an all-time low. So I think 100 Thieves kind of has some work to do as far as like, maybe reeling it in a little bit. And I think sometimes those adjustments can make you worse off in the short term. So I wouldn't even be surprised to see 100 Thieves kind of go on a slump for a bit while they're trying to figure out what's going on, because I think the way they're playing now, where they're just like perma-forcing fights and throwing games at 20 minutes, is kind of hard to break down, what exactly is going wrong. And so they might have to like try some different stuff and really try to figure out what they need to do to like get more consistent. So I would still say they're favored against Dig, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see 100 Thieves just, look horrible and Dig look solid and take it.
Honestly, would be pretty surprised. I still feel like, because as much as I agree with you on the scrims, like it's not a good way to practice. And Quid was on pros with me with Sniper, and like he just straight up said it wasn't a good way to practice. I was like, do you think, because people give them a lot of credit for how good they are at team fighting and just like for having good hands and whatever. And I was like, do you think the fact that you guys are just like always fighting in scrims is actually like benefiting you on stage because you're obviously playing a little bit more reserved, a little bit smarter on stage, but you're still having a lot of success in team fights? And they were just straight up like, nope, like it's just bad. And so obviously they agree with you, but the other side of that is that this has always been the story with 100 Thieves, even before they had FBI, like last year and stuff as well. It was the same thing. They're always bad in scrims, and it hasn't really seemed to like stop them. So like as much as I agree with you, it is, bad to just be trolling your scrims. I feel like if it didn't stop them last year and it hasn't stopped them so far this year and they got to finals and stuff, I feel like, yeah, it might be what's holding them back from being able to compete against the very top teams. I just don't think that's Dignitas. And it's also like we're coming off of a week where we're comparing Dignitas performance versus 100 Thieves performance, but 100 Thieves played FlyQuest and Dignitas played Shopify.
That's true.
Right? So it's like you're just naturally going to look way better against a much worse team. And so I kind of expect the inverse to be true, where it's like, yeah, like 100 Thieves, you there's a lot of holes that get shown when you're playing against against FlyQuest because they're really, really strong. I think them and C9 are clearly like the top two teams right now, right? And I feel like as much as we've talked about top four, I actually think it's kind of like a top two right now because I think TL and 100 Thieves are a lot more beatable. But I still heavily favor 100 Thieves, and I feel like when I'm looking at Dignitas and I'm looking at mid jungle, like I have trouble seeing 100 Thieves like River and Quid not getting significantly ahead every game against Katie and Shaden.
Well, they're getting ahead's never been their problem. Their problem is hard throwing at 20 minutes.
The
reason that I said I have confidence in them ending these games is because all four of their games in the best of ones versus the bottom four teams, 100 Thieves were able to win in the later games. Like pulling up the Lyon one, they actually got behind versus Lyon. They actually got behind a bit versus Dignitas. If you remember, they lost that like fight in the river. So like in a lot of these games versus the bottom four teams, they have actually lost some early skirmishes and then were still able to fight their way back into the game. And to me, when I saw that, and then it gave me actually more confidence that if it wasn't versus, FlyQuest or Cloud9, then I actually did have confidence in the ways that they were ending because they actually did choose, good angles to get back. Like they let the other team start Atakhan. They set up that good, teleport where they came through and River flashes over the wall. He doesn't quite get the smite to steal the Atakhan, but then they still win the fight because of their setup and like wipe them all off and they're able to come back. And so that's why I feel like, versus Dig that they will be able to do it because we have seen, even if they actually didn't get the early leads, then they're still able to end out some of these games. And maybe it is a thing of not only like shot calling, but also like maybe something to do with confidence as far as, going up against top four versus bottom four opponents or something like that. Because the 100 Thieves team is like always seems like a very good vibes team. Mm-hmm. And especially I feel like Quid just like pops off in a lot of the games versus the lower tier teams.
Yeah.
Like his Silas games went crazy again.
It was the
River.
same.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say it was the same in summer last year too, where their only loss all summer to like a bottom four team or whatever was the very first week, the loss to Dig Season when it was Dig Season with they had that hot start the first week. They lost to them, but then they didn't lose another best of three or playoff series against them.
What can you do? Dig Season is too powerful.
Dig Season is inevitable.
Might be another one.
There you go. True. So we'll see. We have one more match. It is C9 Lyon, if I recall correctly, to finish off the week. That is going to be a rematch of Saint versus Loki. That is going to be going down. Obviously, there was a lot of talk about this last time because Saint was definitely the more hyped prospect, coming out of the LCKCL. Obviously, he is on a worse team, but when they went head-to-head last time, Loki definitely got the better of him, was looking a lot stronger. And so it will be a rematch there, and also kind of the continuation of seeing can Lyon, take down one of these top teams, because they have shown that they have some really strong carries, like they have their moments, but they haven't ever really been able to get it across the finish line against one of the top teams.
Yeah, Lyon feels like they're kind of on a
downward trend.
Yeah, or whatever, like is a little bit past that, like a free fall maybe. I think they're struggling because they kind of started with the easy schedule where they were winning and they probably felt really good about it, and now they're hard losing. And I've heard rumors that Saint is a bit of a tilter and that he's losing faith in his team. Also, he picked Xerath this weekend, which I think is reportable.
But didn't that look actually really good? The Nocturne Xerath, they chain killed Yon.
Yeah, but then you have a Xerath on your team, and I don't know, like
that champ always gets picked off later in the game.
This is okay. Maybe it's just my experience, but I see this matchup into Azir. Like every time Azir is meta, some mid laner will be like, "Yo, man, I can Xerath against him. It's so good," and I'm like, okay, your definition of so good is Azir will be kind of annoyed in lane, having to like dodge skill shots perma, but then you're going to get scooped in, or you're going to have to walk into a side lane, or you're just going to get killed somewhere. You do no damage to front line. You can, like, all your stuff's dodgeable. Like, to me, Xerath, easily like a bottom 10 champ in the game. I think even if you play him really well, he's not good. And God forbid you make a mistake on him, you're just out of the game entirely. So I was really shocked to see that one from Saint, and yeah, I don't know. To me, that doesn't feel like a pick you do in a game you're trying to win. So maybe he's like losing faith, getting desperate, feeling like he just has to do some weird stuff. So yeah, I think a matchup against C9 is going to be rough for them right now. I think that they're probably not feeling great overall, and yeah, I'm gonna give this one to C9.
Yeah, I mean, to speak on the Xerath thing too, because I do think it's kind of cool when you have a focused strategy of, like pairing super long range damage with the Nocturne, but it does end up feeling kind of gimmicky when you have a lot of resources that you have to use to like kill one person, and then you're not left with a lot of other resources for the actual team fight afterwards, and so it becomes very difficult to pull off. Because, like, yeah, you could kill Yon, but then they're down. They've like overextended so far to kill him, and they're down all these ultimates, and the rest of their comp is like super squishy and has a lot of vulnerabilities, and so then they just get run over by the rest of TL, and like the rare occasion where Yon like is able to live or something, or get off his ulti or something like that, they would come back. I still think it's cool, because we rarely see comps that are so skewed to like one side like that, so heavily invested into a strategy.
I really enjoyed watching it.
So yeah, I enjoy watching it. I did. Part of the reason it is rare, I think, is because it's harder to execute, and the like overall chances of success are going to be a little bit lower. But I still think it's cool, and it's great from a viewer perspective. 100% agree there. But yeah,
yeah, sure. It's cool. It's a novel pick, but I just think Xerath is so bad that like I don't know why you would do that.
As far as Saint versus Loki specifically, though, I do think there is definitely something there, like beyond the history of them playing versus each other in LCKCL, because also when I asked Saint coming up about the Super Week gauntlet, when we're like, oh, he's gonna have to play against all these powerful mid laners of Loki and Quad and Quid, and he did not hesitate when I was like, oh, who's the best and who's gonna be the easiest, and he was like, easiest is gonna be Loki, and I was like, whoa. I expected him to. A lot of times, players will be like,
they'll think about
nice about it, or even if they like already know the answer, they'll be like, well, all my opponents are strong, and it'll be a good series either way. But he was pretty sure, and I was like, okay, so maybe there's a little something here. So yeah, I mean that's definitely the individual matchup that I'm most excited to see, because I know that the Cloud9 team has really liked working with Loki, and like feels pretty pretty strongly there. So definitely will be a fun one to watch because Cloud9 overall, the team, like you have to say that they're for sure favored coming into this with the drop off that Lyon have had. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 games in a row now that they have lost.
Yeah, they started 3-0, 3-6 now. Definitely tough. I mean, C9 is going to be favored against pretty much everyone, so it's not like that shocking to say. But yeah, I mean, Thanatos versus Licorice seems like that would be pretty rough. Blabber's been looking really good. I feel like Loki's definitely been quite solid. But I also feel like the C9 bot lane has looked like the best bot lane in the league. Like I think they're doing really, really well. Of course, I want to see more. Like I want to see best of 3s and best of 5s against FlyQuest and and TL and all these other really strong bot lanes to really kind of like solidify that. But just based on in-game performance, they are really smurfing it right now. So definitely going to be a tough one for Lyon, expecting C9 to stay on their winning ways. And you talked about all the loss streak for Lyon. They're on 6-game losing streak. C9 are on an 8-game winning streak, if I have that correct in my head, because I still think the only game they lost was the first game of the season, which was against 100 Thieves. So they are absolutely killing it right now. But that is going to be it for now. We're going to take a quick break, and then we are going to be coming back with Matt Phroxzon from Riot to talk about the Season 2 changes, as well as what it's like being a dev on the front lines of social media.
Ready, set, go!
I'm at 47%.
Oh, I'm on 63%.
Man, I'm at 50%. Boom! 80%. Winner! The Kia EV9 can go from 10% charge to 80% charge in just 24 minutes with DC fast charging.
Welcome back to the dive driven by Kia. We are now joined by Matt, the lead designer for League of Legends.
Designer, yeah.
Lead
Welcome,
gameplay
welcome.
designer for League of Legends, here to talk a little bit about a few things. Mostly that Split 2, Season 2. Is this Season 2?
Season 2.
Season 2.
Yep.
Spirit Blossom.
No more
Ionia
splits.
is
No more
coming.
splits.
Ionia is coming. It's going to be here. I guess by the time this episode comes out, it will be the patch will actually be out. I guess the patch is already out.
It's already out.
There you go.
Yeah.
So I just haven't So there you
Up
go.
that priority.
True. Higher priority. But before we get into that, I was also interested to talk to you a little bit about, obviously, you're one of the people who is becoming kind of one of the faces of League of Legends, right? You're in the videos, you're posting, patch note previews and all these kind of things on Twitter. And so you're kind of interacting with the community a lot. Previously, Freak had been doing a lot more social media and stuff, and he took a step back because of kind of like community criticism and the hate and the attention that was getting. And now Mortdog, who has been, I think it's fair to say, like the face of TFT, right? Like that's what everyone associates with
100%.
them. Like people, to the point where it's like getting Mortdogged is,
The term in the game.
is a
Yep.
term that like every pro uses. Like even my friends who casually play TFT are like, I got Mortdogged, right? Like everyone knows it. And now he is taking a step back. He's not going to be streaming anymore. He's not going to be doing any Twitter patch note previews or anything because of like all the negativity and the hate that he has been getting. And so I was kind of curious to get your take on it because obviously, there are advantages in being able to talk with the community and have this back and forth. And, the community generally seems to want that. But yet we keep kind of getting in these situations where people who are in those roles are finding it like too stressful or too negative or just like basically not worth it and are then having to step back.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely a few things going on here. I think for the first part, it's a lot of extra work, like for many of us, it's not really part of our official job descriptions. I guess like there's some where it's like, probably for me and for Mort in particular, it's like more part of our official duties, to be like a communicator and a face of the game. But it is like a whole bunch of extra effort. And if you're receiving a bunch of like negative flack for it, then it's just, why am I even doing this, right? Is kind of the thing. And there's a lot of, certainly like a few rotten apples spoils the bunch, right? Like the vast majority of interactions are pretty positive. Even like playing with Riot in your name, it's like,
Oh, yeah.
I did not find that positive, by the way.
Okay. There is,
That was crazy.
Okay. That one in particular is not so great, but like
I lasted, I think, 2 weeks before I changed my name when I was a writer.
if you're doing a good job, right? Like a lot of the interactions are positive, but it's just those negative interactions, kind of similar to loss aversion, where it's just they really stick out, and it also really sticks out if the team is like not doing so great a job under your direction, right? You feel responsible for that outcome as well. And so it can kind of like be an amplifier on things that you're doing, either things that you're doing well or things that you're doing poorly, right? And so in a situation where the game, we've had rough patches, I've kind of been through it all. And it's like, in the rough patches, it's like, yeah, it is pretty rough to get out there and talk about stuff that's gone really poorly, right? Like, even for Season 1 this year, it's like, with the Atakhan stuff and the feat stuff, like, we had some reactions to how that was going internally. We didn't think it necessarily, like, fully matched what players were saying about these systems, like the objective truth of how strong feats and stuff were, but we kind of just had to like sit there and try and fight back against this like tide of negativity, right? So it does definitely wear on you at times. For me personally, I have a very like strong growth mindset. I think all of us do, right? And so it's like when I see a lot of criticism, it's just kind of like, yeah, they're right. Like, let's think about like how we can do it in the future. And there are definitely people who function like that, and certainly for all the people that we've mentioned here, it's like, yeah, they will have that mindset, but those small bits of negativity just like hit at you over time, and they build up, and then it's just like, oh man, I just need to like go cold turkey or whatever, like David did that earlier this year, and it was last year or whatever it was, and yeah, I think that was positive for him because he's still back to doing rundowns now, and he got to reset his mental a bit. So yeah, I
know. Basically all of the people, even the ones that have had to take a break, like Freak, they 100% recognize all the positives, and even probably the people that are like crossing the line and super flaming them and even threatening them. Still on some level, like recognize all the positives and the interactions because
some of those people are too far gone, man.
Yeah, some of them are just like
some of those
fully rotten
people
apple
are
this.
crazy.
Yeah. Maybe not those people, but like
Mortalk showed me some of his DMs. Yeah, some of those people are irredeemable.
I mean, I've gotten the death threat ones that are like, I'm gonna cut off this part of your body and feed it to you and watch like really those types of things, and like
there's some crazy people out there.
Like the reasons why people do end up taking a step back and are like those super extreme cases. But it is always nice to see too. There will be Reddit threads where everyone is like, can we take a moment to like appreciate how much Riot, communicates with people? Because I feel like this over the course of the history of this game, we have had so many people that have communicated so much, and it's like very different from so many other games where there'll be very limited balanced communication and stuff. So
a lot of other games barely even get changes.
Yeah,
like that was one of my frustrations with WoW. Honestly, like when I competed in WoW, it's like if the expansion started and like PvP was really bad balance, better luck next expansion.
Yeah.
Like, because there might be some changes, but often like things weren't going to be, there wasn't going to be like a class redesign mid expansion or things like that. You're kind of just like stuck with it.
Yeah.
So that is something I think sometimes people who started on like Riot games or like that's their first like live service game that they played are just like, yeah, that's just like how it is. Every game gets changes every 2 weeks, and you hear from the devs and whatever, and it's like coming from a lot of other games. Nope, that was not the case. So that was something I always really appreciated. When I started playing a lot of League was like, oh, you actually get to know what all the changes are, and they're happening every 2 weeks, and they tell you why they're doing them, and like I thought that was really cool. I'm kind of curious how when there is like such just an overwhelming amount of I don't want to say noise because that just sounds negative, but like an overwhelming amount of opinions, right? And people feel really strongly about like whether it's their champion and like you're nerfing their champion, and it's like, what the fuck are you doing? You're gonna nerf Udyr, that's my champ.
I mean, every time I post a patch preview, man, it's like all of the one tricks like
exactly.
I'm like filtered through 150 comments.
So like if you guys feel confident in a change, or you feel confident like this is the correct direction or whatever, but you're hearing like so much against it, like how do you actually kind of balance that, and at what point, even if you think it is a positive change but so many people hate it, like at what point are you actually wrong, like kind of how do you take into consideration all of the stuff that you guys are hearing from the community into what you're actually doing with the game?
I mean, we have a lot of design principles that we use to try and steer the ship the right way, in the sense that it's like, if someone, I don't know, like, I'll just take like the Zach main who keeps posting on the things, and he's like, Zach, blah, 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 like, like the Q damage, the whatever. And it's like, we'll look at just a whole bunch of things that, one tricks aren't really evaluating the game holistically, right? And so we need to have these holistic principles for just how we want combat to resolve, how we want game pacing to resolve, how we want objectives to play out and all of these types of things. And we'll have these, you know, sets of like tens to hundreds of principles that we'll use to evaluate whether changes are moving things in the right direction, like it's burst the right at the right levels. And then we can kind of say, okay, well, is this person's criticism like, you know, pointing us in the direction that we want to move the game, right? We kind of have this like steering, visioning type of pod of like senior designers that kind of are just like, okay, we want to push the game in this direction. And sometimes a lot of those comments are like pretty valid, right? I think there was a period last year where assassins were pretty weak, like pretty impotent, and we were trying to find ways to just kind of take the feedback from assassin players, because like everyone complains about assassins. It's like even if Zed is like 42% win rate or something, people would want him nerfed, right? And so it's like, how do we decide whether or not Zed is like it does
being assassinated?
Yeah, so we'll have like some principles for like, okay, well, like they need to use their ultimate, they need to use this, that, or the other thing. Like they should be strong on one item. They should not be able to one shot through enchanters. And we might do things like, you know, testing with game analysis team. Like, are they actually able to do these things, right? Like some more objective metrics that we can look at and scenarios that can play out, that can be like, yeah, Zed is actually not only statistically underpowered, but the things that he does in game are actually underpowered, right?
Yeah.
And so we use a lot of those types of things, and there's like many bespoke ones for all of the different classes, different items that champions are purchasing and whatnot. Like mages should not have plus 800 health on average, right? And things like that. And so
I got bad news about that last.
Yeah, I know. Okay, we're nothing wrong. We're doing some AP item changes. Yeah. So, but that's like a
But that's
principle
one of the reasons
that
like
we
you're
would
saying.
use, right?
So
Yeah.
they are doing that, so you're changing it.
Yeah, and then there's also like just, is it actually factually optimal? Right?
Yeah.
And it's like, is it optimal to buy Roa every game? Like, I don't think so. It's optimal to buy it in some games, right? Like you might play against mid jungle assassins and you're playing Victor or something. It's like, yeah, sure, buy Roa. If you're playing against like Vagar and like some, it's like, okay, well, you're just gonna get outscaled anyway, so like why would you do that? And so there's a lot of like trying to read through the objective truth of things, like looking at item win rates, looking at how they feel, talking to pros, like looking at high elo, seeing what they do. A lot of these types of things that we use to try and filter through a lot of that stuff. And a lot of the times, like the one tricks provide a good signal or a good hotspot for us to look at and say, hey, maybe something's wrong, right? And so the way I look at it is just, hey, are they flagging something that seems like it's plausible? You know, like people will throw out theories all the time, and it's like, we have to just rely on our experience. Is this worth spending our time investigating? Yeah.
Or like a lot of times they'll come up with like good, interesting little tweaks to mechanics rather than maybe overall, you know, power level. They might be more biased.
Yeah. And then there's always stuff where it's just like suggesting solutions that are just like, yeah, that's just terrible design, you know? And so there's like a lot of these types of things where it's like, okay, what are they trying to communicate? Right. And then it's like, oh, well, they're actually trying to say, we don't feel tanky enough when we engage in a fight or whatever. And like, we might find a better solution for the thing that they were. Exactly.
Yeah. I remember back when Skarsgård was at Riot, one thing he said to me that always stuck out was he said players are really good at identifying problems, but terrible at finding solutions.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
So that was the one thing that always stuck with me, because I remember in my early days, I would always think like, yeah, like the solution's so obvious, you just got to do this, this, this. And it's like, well, there's actually hundreds of things you could do to address a problem, but like, you know, what's the collateral damage of that going to be? So, I thought that was really insightful.
Yeah. I like that you have, so you have like this guiding like commandments doc or something that you can return to when you get like lost in all of the
I mean,
shalt not die to one
craziness.
shots.
a lot of it is very like consolidated in people's heads, and so like everyone knows who the experts are to talk to about these things. So we have like a few people that are like really experts in AP system or really experts in game pacing and whatever, and we try and write them down.
I was gonna say that's definitely a big one. Especially if they move on. The other thing is like, how do you revisit it sometimes and update it, because like it can become like outdated, I guess, if you build like this view of the game or something. Do you have a schedule or something, or like come back to periodically reevaluate? Are we, you know, what does the best form of the game look like?
Yeah, like the best frameworks are kind of constructed in a way that they are somewhat timeless, but you always come back to them. So for example, like let's use our champion gameplay framework, for example, like how we're making champions. It's like one of the principles is like strong first impression, right? Like it is general enough that you can understand what are the factors that go into a strong first impression, and it's not really going to change that much, right? Or like,
well, that has worked because everyone is of the opinion now when a new champ comes out, I better learn it.
yeah, I mean, it should draw attention, right? And hopefully for the right reasons, not because it's like 200 years or something, you know. But it's like, but it's like, you know, like for champion gameplay framework, we have like 9 things that are like at that, you know, like level, right? And it's like there's a lot of things that make up for a strong first impression, right? Like, do they have a appealing thematic? Like, do they have a blah blah blah? Like all of these
unique
types of things.
abilities.
Like, yeah, do they have a kit hook that is like immediately attractive or whatever? Can you tell what it is straight away?
Are they different than other champions?
Yeah, and so we'll have a lot of those types of things for you know, item balance or champion balance as well, right? So, and yeah, certainly the frameworks need to be constructed in a way that they are reasonably timeless, right? Yeah,
makes a lot of sense. We could talk about this forever, but you are here to talk about Season 2. We're going to Ionia.
Yep.
Spirit Blossom ahoy. Talk to me about some of the major changes here. You know, you can kind of just talk through about, maybe we'll start with like Atakhan, because that was obviously a pretty hot button topic. I mean, my read, and I think generally the community read, was that, you know, GA Atakhan was like just way too dominant in pro play. It was warping games. Now I feel it's at a point where I actually think it's weak in pro play. Like, I think it's actually way better to get Voracious is the flower one, right?
Ruinous is
the flower one. Okay.
No more Ruinous anymore. No more Voracious
You're
anymore.
free now.
Yeah, it's just one.
The flower one.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be Thornbound. So talk to me a little bit about the thought process of how you're changing Atakhan and stuff.
Yeah. So kind of when we first started with Atakhan, we were thinking about ways that we could make the game state a lot more adaptive to what's happening. You know, we saw how slow some of the pro games were. We saw how fast some of the regular play games were. And we have this overriding principle that we love in League games, which is like variance, right? Like, one of the reasons why League is so sticky and so fun is because every game feels different. And so we thought, how about we lean more into that principle and try and solve two birds with one stone. At the same time, we were kind of just like, okay, in slow pro games, you need to do something pretty extreme to break open like a 5-5 deadlock at 25 minutes, right? And so we were testing a bunch of these different things. You know, it's debatable whether or not that goal was even correct to pursue in the first place if we knew how game warping the effect would need to be. And we kind of arrived on the GA being the thing that would break the game open and cause people We were right. We achieved the goals, but at what cost? Right?
Yeah.
So there was definitely a lot of this type of thought like driving that, where it was just like, hey, people don't like watching super stale, slow pro games, and we need to kind of go back to the drawing board to figure out how we can solve that problem in a way that just doesn't feel like it's not League of Legends anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So it's still something that like we would want to do in the future. And so we kind of decided, okay, well, like, Ruinous is a pretty safe objective, right? And safe in terms of design. And we wanted to find a way to add a 20-minute objective that wasn't going to blow the game open immediately, right? Like, if you take Baron at 20 minutes, it's like, okay, cool, all the towers are gone immediately. Like, it's just a massive gold swing. And so we wanted to find a way that we could provide basically like a medium tier objective, like more impactful than Rift Herald, less impactful than Baron. And I think we did pretty reasonably with that with Ruinous and now Thornbound, because Thornbound is like pretty similar to Ruinous. So that was a lot of the thought process for what we were trying to go for. Like, it was pretty, you know, sad to just watch, you know, teams not be able to take Baron unless you were T1, right, for 5 minutes as well. So it's just like the objectives weren't even working properly, and we couldn't nerf Baron because we didn't want it to blow the game open immediately, right? So that's kind of the thought process for why we wanted to add Atakhan into the game. I think overall it did what we wanted, but maybe not at the cost that is reasonable for the game warping considerations. And so Thornbound is trying to strike the best of both worlds, where it's like, hey, playing for flowers is impactful. Like, if you have a top laner that's ahead, they can take a lot of flowers in the 14 to 20 minute window after towers go down and stuff like that. And it's hard to contest, you know, Fiora or Camille, who's like, you know, picking up all the flowers in the side lane.
Why did you guys decide? Speaking of the flower thing, I actually find it really interesting with the current version, how you take the objective, but then you have to actually be able to take the flower field, right?
Yeah.
Like, I actually really like that, because it's like, it's the only objective that's like that, where it's not just like the click of a button and then you know who wins. Because you could get the smite, but then if you lose the fight, then like you lose the flowers, or you're trying to take the flowers, but they're taking the fight, so you're dying for it. You know, why did you guys decide to move away from that? Because I actually thought that was one of the most interesting things you've done with objectives in a really long time.
Yeah, it was definitely really interesting. One of the reasons why we moved away away from it is because I don't know how many Lua games you guys have watched recently, but like people ignore flowers. Like they don't understand how to use them. Like the clicking paradigm seems quite challenging for some reason, and so it's kind of just like it also plays against the whole learned behavior of smite the objective. And so that those two factors combined were kind of the main ones where it was like people, you would watch people go, I got the smite steal. It didn't actually do anything, And so there's a lot of people who like don't, for us, like super sophisticated, like play the game a ton players. Us. Like, I mean, we play the game a ton.
That's brilliant. That's, extremely sophisticated.
But it's just like even just talking about the game is like already like top tier of sophistication, right? And so it's just like, watching a lot of the behaviors of regular players playing the game, like they don't really understand what's going on. And so even though it's like great for us, it's like as like, super engaged players, it just wasn't quite clicking for the regular players. And so we thought, maybe we can take a better stab at this later. And there's definitely some community appetite for like what that looks like, but we thought it would just be better to
that makes sense
to narrow those.
It
is really cool for sure.
I'm imagining games where there's just this beautiful garden now on one side after Atakhan's been taken. It just stays there the whole time.
Yeah, I had one question about the different season stuff like Noxus, Ionia, whatever. So my initial impression was when the Noxus season came out that all these new things were going to be more temporary, and now I guess I'm just curious how temporary / long term are these things going to be? Because with like feats of strength, Atakhan, the flowers, are you guys looking to do more of like temporary seasonal things that's going to be like it's here for one season or 1 year, whatever, then it's gone, or are these going to be more like permanent gameplay things that are just going to be in the game forever?
Yeah. I would say everything's an experiment in the sense that like we're always trying to figure out what the community likes. This season we were trying to do a lot more story oriented stuff. So we were trying to go from the perspective of what is great gameplay that we can deliver, and then we would work with creative through the whole process, like all of last year, to figure out, okay, like we want this new epic monster, right? And it's like what epic really monster can we and it's like what epic monster can we make, right? And so the gameplay comes first, right? We decide what is good for the game, which is we wanted this 20-minute objective. And then we worked with creative and we were like, okay, we're doing Noxus season. Are there any Noxus big bads that we could find? And, so we would go through this collaboration with creative and we were like, oh, what about Atakhan from Lore, right?
That's super cool because I felt like with the success of like Arcane and stuff, I was like, they probably have like the storyboard or whatever, and like Atakhan is supposed to come in, and so then you guys had to adapt to it. But that's really cool to hear that it's the other way around.
Yeah, and so we kind of like collaboratively worked on this thing, and there was a whole bunch of collaboration about, what's a story we can tell with Atakhan? Oh, what about like Mordekaiser and like Azael and like all of these types of things? And so a lot of this was just a very collaborative, like gameplay first. Bring narrative along and just like work kind of creatively in the way that like a champion would be made. In champion we have like this DNA process, which is like design, narrative, and art. And any of those three pillars, and then product kind of like is overall all three of those. But it's like that group of 4 people or 4 disciplines like works together, and one might have a really strong vision for what it is. So like for Viego, for example, it's like, the narrative is guiding the exploration. It's like, what if we make the Ruined King, right? And so similarly for and sometimes it might be design led. It's like, for Zeri, it's like August is like, what if I make a marksman that has Ezreal Q every attack, right? And so a lot of it is kind of just like who is leading the exploration. In this particular arrangement for seasons, we were like, hey, we want to lead with gameplay first, right? Yeah. And so then narrative and art comes after that, and there's a whole bunch of exploration that was done, and we arrived on Atakhan.
I have a little tiny bit of feedback for the bringing the narrative along piece, and that is because I am one of these sophisticated, long-term, obviously players. Like I'm only really focused on like grinding rank, and I'm like very serious, and a lot of my friends are so. We have had this like bubble of none of us knew any of the lore around Atakhan, even though it's like cool. But what does get through to us are the videos.
Yeah, totally.
So I'm like, oh, that was super sick. Like, so I know everything there. So like the lore, I know they put a lot of work into it, and there's the game, and there was like,
have you considered doing picture books instead of patches?
Exactly.
For the sophisticated.
What about the motion
exactly. Well, I'm just saying, there's a lot of TikTok brain people out there. So like a little short form video, slap that right in the center of the.
Yeah, I mean, it's a creative challenge for us, right? Like, so for Demon's Hand, for example, we're trying to find ways to creatively tell narrative in a way that like TikTok brain people will engage with, right? Because like people seem to like narrative when it's like put in front of them, right?
Yeah.
But they don't want to go click through and like read a novel. Like
they don't want to read a book.
There are like I would say like 10 to 20% of people that do want to do that, and that's great, and we can hyper serve those people. But then there's also just like like a lot of people who just like don't want to do that.
They want it to be part of the game that they're playing.
Yeah, and that's and so we're trying to strike like the right balance there and figure out what that looks like. But to your point, to your original question, for this particular season, we wanted to see, hey, are gameplay with narrative type explorations going to resonate with players, and it might inform what we do next season, it might not, we might try and do something different, but we always want to strike the balance of like the thing that we deliver for the start of the season in particular for season 1 is going to be like different, or is going to carry some interest, whether or not it's like because it's experimental content that like goes away, or whether it's like durable content that stays forever. It's like unclear. But we'll always try and like figure out what is going to be exciting.
It makes a lot of sense to me doing it in this way because it allows you to experiment. And if you're doing it in this seasonal framework, then it's like, okay, if it's not the best, then it doesn't stay, right?
Yeah,
like it
totally.
goes away. And if it is really resonant and it is really good, then there's no reason that it can't become a permanent addition to the game, right?
Like
it
like
gives
TFT
you
with augments, right?
Yeah, I was just about to mention TFT because I know that something Mort talked about a lot is, concerns about complexity, because even if you make cool things like flowers, grubs, whatnot every season, even if each individual thing's super cool, at some point, a few years down the line, a new player tries playing the game and they're just like, what am I looking at? Like, 100%. This is so confusing. It becomes overwhelming. So that's probably something you have to consider, right?
Yeah, we have a lot of like these types of like complexity frameworks, I'll call them. I don't know if you've heard of something called like lenticular design, but it's a term that was like popularized by Mark Rosewater. He's like the Magic the Gathering dude. And basically like lenticular design is a lot about how do different segments of player interpret a piece of content. So for example, like the in Magic there's, discard your hand, right? Is a card. It's a very simple concept, but it's very confusing for a play, like why would I want to discard my hand, right? Like, but for a sophisticated player, it's like, oh, there are so many combos I can think of going back through, like all of the Magic cards that existed that could interact with like discarding, and so it's like a very rich thing for a very sophisticated player. Now that's like just like a single application of it, but that's something in League that we tend to apply, which is like, okay, well, a player is going to look at a piece of content in a very different way depending on which lens they're viewing it from. People who have played the game for 15 years like us are going to interpret looking at Atakhan a very different way than a new player, right? And so we want to try and find the right balance of having something that reads clearly to a new player, even if it's actually really complex. Like the rules around Atakhan and all the flowers spawning and all of that stuff is really complex. But ultimately, the player just needs to know, okay, I can kill Atakhan, I get a reward.
Clicking flowers is good.
Yeah, and clicking flowers feels good, right? For us, we'd be like, oh, we should send the top laner to be strong and go in the flower lane, and we should like do all of this, that, and the other thing. We should like push out the side lane that Atakhan's in first when he spawns so that we have priority. Like all of these types of things. So we try and design content such that it can be read easily by a regular player and be baseline proficient at that, while also having just a lot of depth and replayability for the experienced player. So that's kind of how we try and get around that.
Let's talk a little bit about just kind of the like different objective pacing, right? And maybe kind of how you guys work on balancing the difference between pro and solo queue with that. Because to me, I don't know if this was like a hot take or I felt differently. I felt that the amount of objectives made pro the least interesting to watch that I've ever found.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I was actually really loving it when I was playing the game.
Yeah.
Like I found it really fun having all these objectives to fight over, but I hated watching it because I just felt like they're just following this like predetermined script.
Yeah.
Your bot lane swap top for first grubs. You go there. Okay, you're too weak to fight grubs, so then you do the other objective. Okay, now you reset. Time for the next objective. Reset. Time for the next objective. Reset. Time for the next objective. Okay, team took Baron. All right, they won.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
it kind of started feeling like there wasn't that room for creativity.
Yeah.
But yeah, most people I talked to did really like it in solo queue, and I loved actually playing the game with all those objectives. So, what was kind of the thought process there on obviously the changes being there's only one single spawn of grubs. The Rift Herald is coming at 15 minutes. The grubs are coming at 8 minutes, if I recall correctly now, to desync from Dragon.
8 minutes.
So the idea being you can't just like change and trade, you know, the objectives every time, and maybe more conflict and less overall objectives.
Yeah, there was definitely a few different factors like that caused this. One is just the overriding principles of like how many objectives should there be. You know, like we often have this thing about ganking, right? Which is like there should be just enough ganking that it's a credible threat, such that like you don't feel like you can like perma push with Victor or something and just like annihilate the opponent. And so similarly for objectives, it's just like we want there to be, you know, just the right amount of objective taking while balancing like jungler creativity and like support creativity. And I think I do think that we lost a bunch of that by just having so many objectives right next to each other. And so a lot of that was just, hey, is the feedback that all the players and the pros and, you know, like casters, right, are giving us, is this valid? Like, how does this relate to the principles that we have? And the high level principle is kind of just like junglers in particular should be able to express creativity, right? And so it's like, okay, we're probably violating that principle. And so in that instance, it's like, okay, well, what is causing that? Obviously, like it's a lot of the objective spawning, and so we were also running into lane swaps at the same time. And so it's kind of just like one principle is the jungler creativity, the other is like the sanctity of laning phase and just making sure that experience makes sense. And so a combination of those things just led us to be like, okay, well, we can kind of resolve the swap issue by just moving the grubs back because they swap for grubs. It's important that some objectives read stronger than others because otherwise they just get traded, which is something that we saw ages ago. And so we kind of just like push them back so that, you know, if you do have bot prio, you could get dragon and then you could think about like whether you want to do something for grubs, but you couldn't like necessarily trade them. So that's a lot of the thoughts that went into that, where it's just like, yeah, the feedback was aligned with where we wanted to move the game principles wise, or it was in violation of it. And we didn't necessarily like think that it was going to be this extreme suddenly, and like when we were developing it, and it was kind of a scramble at the end, so we kind of just had to get some stuff out. But mostly that thought pattern.
I've had one question that I want to run by you. It pertains, I think, probably more to pro play than solo queue, but I felt this way for a really long time. Where what is your view on sieging as a gameplay tactic? Because in my mind, it's always kind of been a non-viable thing to do in League. You know, there are some exceptions. You have like a Ziggs or someone who can just completely blast a turret, but the combination of wave clear, just instantly killing the waves, and, you know, champion range, it's almost never worth it in a pro game to be like, hey, let's just group up and hit this turret, which is why I think that leads to some of the staleness when there's no objectives, right? Because it's like, with Baron, you can siege because your minions become crazy. And over the years, there's been, you know, like the Banner of Command, which I actually liked the idea of that item, but obviously the way it played out was
Or like Zerat.
Yeah, there's like Zerat Portal. There's like
crazy.
There was like Ohm Wrecker. There have been, you know, kind of attempts at it over the years, but it still kind of feels like sieging's never really been a true option. I think if you have like 6 grubs, you can do it.
Yeah.
But I was curious what your thoughts are on that, and if it's like, you know, intentionally that way or whatnot.
So I agree. This has been one of the pet projects of mine for a long time. I think if I was still a dev, like actually implementing stuff, I mean, I would definitely be pushing on this problem more. One of the issues is that it takes like a lot of iteration and like very skilled designer to pull off like the sweet spot of that particular change. We've explored things like, you know, getting a cannon into the turret range will like fire off a shot that like actually does some significant damage, or like changing the minions that spawn and all of these types of things. TLDR is like, I agree with you. I think sieging should be more powerful outside of a poker comp, outside of 6 grubs. And it does make the rock paper scissors a bit like kind of it's scary, right? And that's why it's difficult. That's why it's difficult to pull off, right?
I'm
and
just
so
thinking of playing a melee top laner into like Quinn or whatever, and every time the cannon gets there, you lose a tower fight.
and it can feel just very suffocating, right? Like sieging is not a type of strategy that has a lot of strategic counterplay. Like 5 people are going to obviously push a lot faster than like 1 Fiora trying to take the base, right? And that whole dynamic, honestly, just needs a bit of a revamp in a way that like simple tuning changes don't do it, right? And so there's a lot of like deep design work that needs to happen to solve that problem adequately, and everyone feels satisfied with the outcome, because I don't necessarily think like, hey, make sieging super good. The only counterplay you have to it is send Fiora top lane. Like that game state is also not super great.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like just depth and richness and satisfaction that we need to build into that loop before we make sieging like a super viable strategy.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I had one last question on like the objectives, and then I really wanted to talk about bounties, because bounties is something I feel very strongly on.
Okay.
But as far as these like the changes to objectives, it seems much more simplified.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that was one of the goals, for this split. Are there any mechanics changes to this new Atakhan fight that we need to know about, or is it basically like the old flower one?
I believe he does a little less damage, but other than
Okay,
that,
so the goal is to make it a little less like scary, because that was one of the things. It was like it took a big commitment to get.
Yeah.
So you were happy with the power level, but maybe toned down a little bit of the danger of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The encounter overall is a little. I would say I often see, well, maybe not often. I sometimes see how high damage his encounter is for like players that don't know what's going on, right? Like,
Dude, even pros,
frags.
the amount of pros,
Yeah.
like in all leagues around the world that I've watched, like, because if you watch their screens, they are always watching the people that are approaching them, right? So like they're looking for the fight,
Yeah, totally.
basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you'll watch like a jungler get to 10% HP just taking the drain from the GA Atakhan, like a support is just standing on the edge and getting hit by the spins over and over, and they're at like 10 or 20% before the fight starts. Like this is not just like a low elo thing.
Totally. So I think that part is a bit problematic. Like,
I actually love that.
we-
I feel like it's cool having punishing mechanics.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely wanted to strike the balance between this feels like a real encounter. Like it's kind of expectation breaking when it's like there's this big scary monster. He doesn't actually do anything, and it's just like, okay, well that's just kind of lame, you know?
Yeah.
And also, let's be honest, it's so easy to avoid. Like on one of them, you
it
stand
can
on the outside and you move slightly to the side when they shoot the orbs. On the other one, you move slightly to the side when it shoots the orbs, and you stand on the inside. That's it.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, I do really like when there are things that like you actually have to learn.
Yeah.
And you can make it easier for people, like if you want like indicators or whatever, like a red, reticle where it's going to be or something like that.
Yeah.
To like
Bring the
help
lane
people
swap
learn.
warning into the
But-
Atakhan. Warning, orbs coming soon.
But the last couple of seasonal
need
changes
B-chorus.
with changing the way that PvE is in the game, especially as a jungler, like it has been some of my favorite stuff. Like Void Grubs, I think Void Grubs is like the smartest and coolest thing that you guys ever did. I'm a little bit sad it's going
Very sophisticated.
very sophisticated. Just because of the dynamic of having it be a pack of 3 and being able to steal away one, and
Perfect number.
the benefits of being able to split /
Not too few, not too many.
gives you more decision points. What stuff you want to trade. But I definitely do like the thinking of like having it being meaningful fights and stuff like that for people to grasp.
Yeah, we always want to try and find where the limit is, like should it be 3 grubs, should it be 4? Like, we initially started
would be
with like
ridiculous.
we started with an entire to prototype it. Basically, we took the TFT whiskers cat thing, and it's got this funny like extendo thing, and then so when they were summoning Rift Herald, they were going woo, and there were like 30 of them in the pit or whatever. It was ridiculous. I'll show you guys a clip later, but it's super funny.
I was playing with one thing because I really like also the dynamic thing you mentioned with Atakhan, opposite side of the map or whatever. I was wondering, when are we going to get like a roaming objective?
We've tried it. I mean, during Atakhan development, we tried that. Right? It was ultimately like too hard to track and too random. Like, we would broadcast the location of where Atakhan was going to spawn. It's like it spawned there. Like it's just like really really annoying, right? So we ended up up taking that idea and just having it top and bottom instead. But yeah, we've tried a lot of those types of things. Ultimately it didn't work out super well.
Okay. So for this season, the objectives simpler. Do you think that will be a positive thing for the bounties?
Yeah.
Because of how the bounties have gone so far in the past, I always get very nervous when I see a big bounty section.
Yeah.
And this patch was no exception. So was the first thing that jumped out to me is that these bounties are going to be increasing quicker, pretty much across the board. Bounty accrued from kills and assists increased by 17%. Bounty accrued from farming increased by 14%. But the suppression is now suppressing bounties until a team is moderately ahead, which made me think if we're pairing two of these themes of bounties can increase, like the value of the bounty can increase quicker, but there is also this cutoff suppression thing, made me a little bit worried. Is there going to be this breakpoint? Is that breakpoint of moderately ahead going to have that trap of like, oh no, we were just far ahead enough that we didn't proc the bounties for them, and then because I killed this tower or because, I got, one extra kill or something, then the bounties turned on for them and they got this big swing back. Because swinginess of bounties is definitely one big thing. But then also, one of the most frustrating things in League of Legends is that people do not trust their teammates, and people get really pissed when somebody has the power to throw the game by themselves, and bounties enable like team hate, basically.
Yeah.
I've definitely been there.
My teammate gives one A to a Cassidy.
Jungling also enables team hate.
Yes, so jungling. But like, if I do all this work for like first 15 minutes of the game, and I like playing early game and I like snowballing.
It's a volibear.
I've been there a lot. I did a whole bunch of work, and then my teammate throws it all away. I feel like it's gonna be easier for them to do that. What's the?
If you have an angry volibear one trick in your Twitter replies,
block.
I have chat muted. The only time I like turned on chat was to explain Atakhan mechanics to my AD carry.
Explain.
My AD carry. Okay, she was on the outside.
Listen here.
She was on the outside. She walked in with the ring as
totally.
the Atakhan was going, and I was like, "You're going to die. Just stand on me." Anyways.
Yeah. So, going back to the whole principles thing, we want bounties to kind of like turn on only when the game feels like it needs them, right? Like the bounty system works most effectively when it feels like the player sentiment of, hey, bounties should be on right now, and bounties are on is aligned. And we're always going to make changes that try and push it in that direction. The other principle that we have is basically the game should be in doubt until it's not, right? And so what that means is basically just like, at the point where the game feels like it's over, it should be over quickly, right? Like if a team got Baron and that was a pivotal moment in the game, like the game should shortly end, basically, and the team was sufficiently ahead, right? And basically any other time that's neither of those cases are true, like the game should be in doubt, right? And bounties is basically our main tool to make that true. So one of the things that we would want to avoid, kind of to your point, is like when bounties go from like 0 to 100 at the flip of the switch, that might feel like that principle is violated, right? And so what might happen is like when the bounties feel like they're turning on, there's only going to be like a small bounty, right? And so it's like when the threshold is passed, like we've had instances in the past where it's like, oh, and objective bounties are on, and then the team got like 5k worth of bounties in like 2 minutes or something, right? Like those are the types of scenarios that we would want to avoid, especially when the game is close. So one of the other things in this patch is like the bounties will only trigger when the team is moderately ahead, is trying to make it better match when a team feels like the bounties should be on. Some of the weirdest games are when the game is like kind of even, but like both teams have like a 1,000 gold bounty, right? It just like causes the game to swing. And so it's like that change is attempting to try and make those even games feel like there's not like bounties that will just like randomly throw the game in one way or the other. And only when the game feels like it needs the bounties will be turned on. So that's the intention of that.
Is there an easy explanation for people at home of what moderately ahead is? Because I understand why you don't always want to give the full details and like a formula to people at home to calculate, when stuff turns on or off, or how to calculate bounties. But if people have an idea of, oh, the bounty's turned on, that means we're probably down like 4,000 gold or something like that, you know, give or take whatever objective value and stuff.
Yeah, this is a really interesting topic that I could talk for hours about. And it all boils down to like human psychology, right? Like if I told you, hey, look at this sequence of heads and tails, does it look random to you? You know, people would be like, that, like it doesn't look random. I got heads eight times in a row. Like that's just not random, right? And one of the things that like game designers have to do is strike that best balance between what looks random or what looks like a game is winning and what is objectively random or objectively winning. So like using that type of thing, it's like we've adapted the objective bounties formula over time to move further away from what team is objectively winning to
More
what players would perceive as winning.
I think this is super interesting. There's I remember reading about like a design concept where it was talking like XCOM is a good example. You know, like I don't know if you guys ever played XCOM, but it's like you know, you're aiming and it gives you like a percentage chance on
like
when you're gonna hit,
something.
right? And so when it was like a 92% chance or whatever it was gonna hit, they wouldn't actually give you a 92% chance it's gonna hit, because if you read that, you're like, my ability will hit.
Yep.
So it would actually be more like a 99% chance to hit or even higher.
Yep.
And things like that, because it's, to your saying, it's like it's your expectation, right? Yep. And so it's like you could miss an 80% twice in a row, like that could happen, right? But if it happens in the game, it feels so terrible. So it's like the numbers are lying to you in a way where it's like playing more to your expectation and less to like what is like the reality.
Yeah.
This one feels a little dangerous just because right when you said that, I was like, oh, so then if someone does figure out what the win percentage actually is that there seems like there is an abuse case of, oh, you know, the bounties work this way because that's how it's supposed to feel. But in how it works actually, like if Baus or something is like the most famous, you know, example of like, you know, trying to, you know, figure out and use mechanics like that.
I think
is there an abuse case there, and what is it? So
I wouldn't say there's an abuse case. Like candidly, like we skew much more towards gold, right? Like and gold is just like extremely highly predictive of who is going to win, and it's kind of just one of those things where it's like, okay,
it's way better than doing it
void grubs, like dragons and towers, like they're all really impactful, right? And we see that in our models, and we see that in like it's extremely impactful in terms of like you have a 2-0 dragon lead, like it's going to be a lot. But ultimately players are just like, oh, they have a gold lead, but we have 2 dragons. You know, it might be actually equal, but players perceive it as the team with the gold lead as having, you know, the head. So we kind of skew at that.
You've been able to separate the like having 2 dragons, like the actual power of the buffs, from the ability to like win those fights or something, as far as like the setting, because a lot of people are like, oh, well, if they had 2 dragons, that probably meant that they were also, you know, ahead enough or whatever. They were able to win the fight.
Yeah, we have a lot of like sophisticated data modeling that basically just goes through a whole like
I trust you.
Counterfactual. Yeah, like all of this like statistical stuff where we like try and isolate the variables completely, and it's like, yeah, how many charges did the Rift Herald get off? Like how many towers, and like, you know, do averages across, like, a lot of very complicated maths.
Sounds like I'm gonna focus on objectives then.
No, you should focus on gold.
How concerned are you about potential like wildly swinging comebacks and stuff? Because obviously you know the changes is now pays up to 10% of the gold difference on top of the base bounty payment, capped at 1,000 total, and 1,000 just sounds like such a scary number of like, all right, you know, my jungler into the Baron or whatever, they smite stole it, and we were focused on the Baron, so then they aced us too, and we're 10k, and now they just got like 7,000 gold or something, and like because they took the Baron for a 1k bounty, and then they took all our outers all at once. It's like, how worried are you about that feeling? Because it can feel really horrible when you feel like you're ahead, you're doing all these good things, you've made 20 good decisions in a row, and then like one horrible fight happens, and they get like all these bounties like back to back, and then you're like, all right.
Yeah. I mean, it's
right?
To be honest,
You're
it's like
me.
it's not that much higher than it is on live, right? Like if you were to get an objective bounty on a Dragon or a Baron, that's 500. That could be increased by up to 60%, so that's 800. The new one is up to 1,000, right? And you have to be pretty far behind to get to the 1,000. So I'm not super worried about it. It's pretty easily tunable. But
what's the
certainly
like break
the
point where it gets like higher? You know what I mean? Like, so if you're saying it's like up to 60% of the gold, you said we could hit 800 currently or previously now, so this patch is out this morning.
Yeah.
at what point does it become like the bounty gets higher? Like how far ahead does the team have to actually be?
I think it might be slightly less than it was on previous live.
Okay, so you can hit 1K at a lower lead than you could hit 800 before.
Yeah, I mean, we've been testing it
sounds
for
so
months,
scary
and
to
it's
me.
like it is scary. It can be scary, right? Like, and we've been testing it for like quite a long time. So, but like, you know, obviously day one of live is just, you know, millions of games, and we're like, but we'll tune it pretty quickly and pretty aggressively. Like, if we see that there's a lot of like chaining of bounties in particular. I mean, it happened on live as well, but like, you know, these things are like pretty easily tunable, so I'm not super worried.
Are you right now looking at it like you are going to make quicker tuning changes to bounty system or quicker tuning changes to early game versus late game champion like win rates type of thing? You know,
we
'cause, like,
would
Bounty
change bounties first.
Okay.
Yeah, because that touches everything.
Yeah, the principle is always like get the systems in the right place first, and then do the champions. So whether it's for like items or for game pacing or whatever, like figure out that, because that effect, like we can make changes to Fiora, then we change like bounties again, and it's like, oh crap, like we have to go back
This
and do it
isn't a
again.
case of like oh, you feel the game was too slow or too fast or those types of things, because I know in the past, like especially when kill gold changes, and I saw that kill gold is changing.
Yep.
Which I actually like, because I always like bigger incentives for action.
Yeah, totally in the game. Yep.
Yeah.
And like kills are like a smaller portion of your relative gold as the game goes on. It's like it becomes much more about like, well, can I now take something else that's of value as opposed to the kill itself having value, which is kind of okay. But we just want to make that match perception a little better.
Yeah, so you can get at most 120 more gold at
420.
level 18. But I feel like at level 18, 100 gold is probably not mattering. But
not
I
that
guess
much.
I guess throughout like a really good game,
Yeah.
maybe you end up with, I don't know, 1,000 more gold or something.
Like iteratively, we always want to make sure that every change we make to the systems, bounties in particular, just make it better. Like I think I saw the other day, like Nemesis was like, oh, like this is the best bounty system it's felt in a while. Like it was kind of rough when we released it, right? Like there were a whole bunch of like weird things, and we had a bad bug where like all of the bounties on blue side were always being depressed, like instead of it being on the different side. And so like once we tuned all of those things, like it does actually feel better, and we think that this is going to feel even better, especially after we tune it. So yeah.
How about I don't know if you want to talk about them, but two of the other kind of like major changes. I think the auto assign smite and support items. I honestly think that's like such a minor thing.
Yeah.
I don't really think it matters that much, so we don't have to talk about it unless you want to. But then there's also a highlight of soft inting detection.
Oh yeah.
That is
so excited about that.
I mean, I think I am not alone in my opinion that the worst thing about League is sometimes the players, right? And like I think
But not us.
No.
We're sophisticated.
Not the sophisticated players.
and not
sophisticated
our
players are
viewers
the
either.
worst, man.
Yeah.
Not our viewers,
It's
not
the,
us.
it's the Neanderthals. who don't
Exactly.
watch the dive.
We're sophisticated.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it can be so frustrating, right? Especially with the reality is it's like between queue time, champ select, you know, potential dodges, whatever. I feel like I need an hour to play a game, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, you queue up, you have time for one game, and someone dies early and just decides that they're going to follow you around in the jungle and try to take all your camps, or they're going to like, you know, I had 3 games in a row last week or this week where my bot lane got super pounded, and then someone from the bot lane literally just roamed for the rest of the game, and we had like an ADC with 30 CS at 20 minutes, and like, you know, a Janna just laning top with me for the rest of the game, just trying to last hit things and stuff. And it's like, when I get one of those games, it literally just makes me not want to play, right? Like, I'm just like, I don't want to play anymore today. I'm done.
Yep. I mean, we all feel it. We've all played it for so long.
Yeah.
A lot of the tech hasn't been there, frankly, like for us to be able to detect these things, and we've made like significant investments in the tech basically to be able to detect all of these types of things at scale. And you know, we're pretty confident in the system. We're going to roll it out carefully. The most important thing is basically minimizing false positives, and so we're going to roll it out as
Conservatively.
fast as we carefully can. is a mantra that, you know, like I'm trying to like impress on the team, which is like we should be careful as the first thing, but we should do it as fast as we can, right? And so minimizing false positives, definitely hitting people with the hammer when they should, giving people great feedback about using the reporting system, and please use the reporting system, right? Like that gives us like actual signal for like, did this person do the bad thing, right? As opposed to like, yeah, maybe they were doing the bad thing, but no one reported them. So like, you know, are they doing the bad
I
thing?
know, and this, of course, none of us or, you know, our sophisticated viewers, but there are people who just report you if
Totally.
they don't like you.
Totally.
Spam report.
So it's like, did they do the bad thing
Yeah.
at the time, right? Like use the in-game reporting stuff, right? Like it's super important. It's like the more solid signal we have about when reports and things that we automatically detect line up, we're like, hey, we're pretty confident that something happened because 3 people reported this person at the exact timestamp that we flagged something, right? Like that is going to give us a much better indication.
Is in-game reporting then like more important or like, I don't know, powerful than reporting at the end of the game?
Totally, yeah.
Okay.
Wait, in-game is?
Yeah, I mean, well,
'Cause
like
I-
we use them
it's
both, but
timestamped.
it's just like, you know, is it going to be more impactful when someone like,
I see.
you know, the day after the murder is like, I saw a murder, or like, you know, like when someone just like murders a person.
Bloody knife in.
yeah, it's like I saw a murder. It's like, oh, okay.
I always,
Is the Yi at the tower with the, with the ghost?
the Syndra at
Because
the rock
currently-
camp with the
Nah,
throwaway.
Syndra griefing jungle camps
Yeah.
is the worst
Yeah,
experience
totally,
you can
right.
have in
Yeah,
League. It's because
exactly.
you can't do anything about it. It's just like, wow, all right,
Yeah.
GG, I guess.
Because currently though, I always
deep.
wait until the end of the game because I'm like still trying to win, so I don't want to take the time to like click all the things.
Yeah.
He's locked in.
and support and
It
submit or
takes
whatever.
so long.
I wish we could make it easier, like one click or something.
He's an old gamer. He doesn't have the spare APM, you know? And Volibear, very mechanically.
Sophisticated.
yeah,
Champion.
sophisticated, yes.
But yeah, I'm very enthusiastic about how we can continue to build on this system and just make it, like we might be starting here, but hopefully by the end of the year, we're going to be like up here.
That's really
'Cause
exciting.
The false positive thing, because I can already see it now, like the bad actors, right? It's like the people who they're soft inting.
I didn't
Everyone
do
knows
anything.
they're soft inting, but it's like you have to prove that like in court or whatnot, and it's just like, oh man, my keyboard malfunctioned, and yeah, I flash ulted the ground like 4 times consecutively. It's
Yeah.
just like you're gonna have all those people who are clearly doing the bad thing,
Yeah.
who try to pass it off like they weren't. So that definitely seems like a struggle.
Can we hire a full-time person to just go on Twitter and when people say they got falsely banned, just like post the clips of them
I love
self-hinting?
that stuff when it's like,
I will buy more skins if we have someone dunking on people online who are posting.
We
them.
need like lawyer skins and judge skins. And
Yeah.
we have some.
Janitor Thresh, just get him out. Get him out.
Yeah, exactly. Get all those people can buy to pay that person's salary specifically.
I do definitely agree though with like starting a lenient, since it is a very
Off
new.
with their heads.
It's going to be a new and powerful system.
We'll start lenient. You lose one hand first time you soft int.
Yeah, it's one of the most
Mouse
exciting
hand or
things.
keyboard hand? What are we looking at here?
Their choice.
Oh, no, it's lenient.
Lenient.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, so kind of the TLDR is like, I'm not as excited for like the detections that we're putting out this patch. I'm more excited for the capabilities that this rewrite of the system basically gives us to like continue to expand our detections, make them more and more bulletproof and like immune to these types of like, oh, I just accidentally typed and whatever and burned my flash, whoops, like like these types of things. Like they're all cases that we've been thinking about very deeply, and so we're just like just going to expand on it over time, and hopefully by the time we get to next year, we've like done a major improvement in this area.
Or
That's
if
my hope.
the dad who plays like one game a week or whatever, the kid came in or something and he had to like, go do something. It's like,
Yeah.
sorry, dad, you got headshot on your like one game that you get to play
Yeah.
per week.
And we're tuning it in a way where it's like, when I say conservatively, it's like maybe you just do it once accidentally, like it's not going to trigger a warning. It might trigger a warning at best, right? But like, people who are doing this like consistently over games and games and games, like if someone does it once in like 1,000 games, like honestly, like I don't really care that much about it. It's if you do it like, I don't know, like 10 times in 100 games, it's like, yeah, I probably care a lot about that.
I feel like this may be the most impactful thing that you've done for League in many years.
Oh, totally.
Because
It's exciting.
12 years we've really been going over like how do we handle this? How do we punish people? How do we, get everybody to be sophisticated and enlightened?
Exactly. Like-minded, sophisticated gentlemen such as ourselves. Can I pitch you? I want scaling penalties on the later you dodge in Champ Select. I find it so annoying when people dodge last second in Champ Select that I'm like, if you dodge last second, you're actually wasting so much time for the other 9 people.
To play chicken, because you don't want the dodge timer.
Exactly.
I'm 100% on
I'm
board
like,
with this.
the later you dodge, the longer the dodge penalty.
Yeah. Hot topic. We've discussed a lot about that stuff. I don't want to share anything like preemptive or like promise anything, but yeah, we've talked a lot about this. We've talked a lot about all of these particular
Justice is fun. I'm getting hyped. I'm like, let's do this.
I fucking love Justice.
Get them too.
I wish it just as soon as you were in champs, like that was like the game started. If you dodge, just the same thing. Like you take a remake. It's just lose your LP.
You know, I'm like kind of interested in that idea, but we would need to make sure our hostage detections and stuff work properly. Actually, we've been running a bunch of hostage detections recently, and they've been pretty effective.
Nice.
So yeah, hope to share more about that soon. But yeah, initial tests have been very promising.
That's exciting. Well, sweet. Thank you very much for coming on.
Yeah, of course.
Chatting all about this.
Yeah,
and
super fun.
Thank you all the distinguished people at home.
Distinguished, sophisticated
Players at home who are listening, who are extremely sophisticated.
They're definitely not going to get caught by this new system.
No.
There's no need for us to say there's a warning if somebody used to be a soft inter, you should probably stop now or you're going to get
None
banned.
of our viewers did that.
But we don't have to say that because obviously
very sophisticated.
none
Very
of them
sophisticated.
would do such a thing.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this episode of Dive. Thank you, Matt, so much for coming in. And make sure you guys subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss an episode of Dive. You can check us out on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. The LTA returns this Saturday, May 3rd at 1 p.m. Pacific, while FlyQuest will take on the Shopify Rebellion. We will see you all there.